Слава нашим доблестным вооруженным силам! За Россию! За победу! Ура!
It was only 8 days after Donald Trump was interviewed by Alex Jones on InfoWars that Alex's current and future associates at the time traveled to Moscow, Russia. Former Defense Intelligence Agency head under President Obama, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, was most famously part of this entourage. The purpose of the event at face value was Russian television's, RT for short, 10-year anniversary celebration. RT put on a conference as well as an associated dinner, and the event was famous not because of RT's 10-year anniversary. It was because Michael Flynn was paid $45,000 in fees for speaking at the event, where his son traveled with him, and more importantly, because he dined next to Russian President Vladimir Putin, as well as former FSB director and Russian Minister of Defense Sergei Ivanov. Interestingly, and we will properly discuss Alexander Dugin later, it is worth mentioning Dugin is associated with Ivanov. Ivanov and Vladimir Yakunin sit on the board of trustees for the Center for National Glory of Russia, which organizes the Travelers to Rhodes group. Both men were also working with, in some degree, with the Council on Foreign Relations, which Dugin hints in his last War of the World Island was a double game sanctioned by Putin. Dugin also identified Ivanov as someone along with the Army and GRU that would advance Eurasian geopolitical objectives versus the CFR Atlantist objectives, which had active supporters in Russia. Months before Flynn was in Moscow, Major General Vallely was there as well. However, his purpose was arranging a meeting between Trump and Putin at the future G20 meeting in 2017. Vallely is a friend of Flynn's, Jerome Corsi, who is a CMP member, and former Washington bureau chief for InfoWars. Corsi aided Jones substantially in pushing the QAnon psychological operation on Americans. Vallely was also a friend of psychological operations expert Lieutenant Colonel Aquino, who we will discuss later.
Do you personally know or have you had interactions with General Michael Flynn?
Yes.
You guys know each other pretty well?
Fairly well.
And have you
In fact, before I was in Moscow a couple months before he went over, so I talked to him before he left. And then when he left to go over there and go to the 10th banquet of RT, Russian television, and he sat with Putin. I had been in Moscow 2 months earlier than that, setting up the meeting between Trump and Putin, which I did while I was there. And that was at the G20 conference in 2017. So, yes, and Michael Flynn must be vindicated. He was one of the individuals that the deep state attacked first, as you remember.
Dr. Jerome Corsi as well, and they really railroaded him. I mean, he was looking at, he would have basically died in jail unless he lied about the president was the deal, basically. And we all know that even if he did, they still would have rolled on him.
Yeah, I know, Jerry. I've done a lot of articles with him.
Going back a couple more years, Flynn was the first DIA director to be invited to Russian military intelligence headquarters, and in 2013 he participated in a 4-day leadership development program and met GRU director Igor Sergun. Naturally, we might ask, what does a 3-star intelligence general have to learn about leadership from Russian military intelligence? I don't claim to know what the purpose of the meeting really was, but I believe there is reason to question it wasn't really about leadership, like a corporate leadership conference Cisco or HP would put on, for example. Not even corporate conferences are what they say. It is about making connections and climbing the ladder. Flynn has many interesting connections. Alex Jones would meet him in person before January 6th, and their first public meeting was an awkward exchange. Patrick Byrne was there too with Flynn. Like Flynn had told Alex he wanted no public appearances with him, as if it would foil some plan. The awkwardness certainly wasn't because Flynn was hesitant to associate with so-called conspiracy theorists like Jones. For example, Flynn regularly joins a Miss Mel K, real name Melody Krell, who is a former Mar-a-Lago employee, adult film star, and alt-media personality that got her start with the help of Hollywood people, getting her embedded into the QAnon alt-media. That said, Flynn would go on to give Alex an interview on January 5th, where Flynn was saying the president had the power to overrule the courts in the interest of national security.
Crazy day, huh? It is a crazy day. You scared? We're gonna win. What? No, I mean, you scared? Take my hand? You guys are funny, man.
This is January 5th, the night of we're about to go into another one of these constitutional dates, January 6th tomorrow, and we still don't have an outcome for the. I have actually been part of taking over countries. Everybody in this country, everybody in the world knows that this election on the 3rd of November was a total ripoff. It was a fraudulent election. We have had foreign interference from multiple countries. I'll rattle them off here if you want to get into that. And Donald Trump was the clear winner. For the next 4 days after the 3rd of November, from about the 4th through the 7th, 8th of November, they just started stuffing the ballot boxes, and everybody knows it, and they got caught. They got caught with their hands in the proverbial cookie jar, so that's where we are.
Gotta go. We'll finish this up, General Flynn. This is an amazing interview. 3 branches, co-equal, legislative.
Okay, so let's talk about that, because I know the direction you're going to go.
Well, my point is,
this is super important. We have 3 co-equal branches of government, okay? But if you read the Constitution, there's one person that gets voted on by the majority of people in this country.
President.
That's the President of the United States.
He's the leader.
When the President puts his hand on the Bible, when he takes his oath of office, there's only one person in this country that takes that oath of office. I've taken.
No, I agree. It's not a unitary executive. The president has like 1% above it.
The president of the United States. So you have 3 co-equal branches, but the president is actually he's not a branch. He is a person voted on by the majority of this country, and it's not by happenstance that the oath of office that the president of the United States takes. If you go back and you look at the founding fathers and the arguments that they had, actually, and for those that want to dig into it, it's Federalist Paper number 73. And you look at it as to why they chose those words. Because the President of the United States has a responsibility to protect the Constitution. Everybody else can scream about it. The courts can say, we're not going to do anything about it, like the Supreme Court did. But the President has the responsibility, the duty, and the authority to act, and it's above the others because there's something called national security.
Alex talked about Flynn much earlier than 2020. In 2017, during an interview with Dugan, Alex mentioned Flynn, saying Flynn said Russia wants to work with the United States. Even earlier, he was speaking with Michael Maloof about Flynn, where in the same interview, Maloof names Vallely as a contact, and Jones mentions the name Lieutenant General McInerney, which is an interesting tidbit because in the final days of the Trump presidency, Alex claimed something along the lines of he didn't know McInerney and derided him as an old, senile general. This was in the context of a viral video going around with McInerney claiming such things as special operations took Pelosi's laptop. Why would Jones say such things about McInerney when he knows of him? My guess is it had something to do with the plan to keep Trump in power collapsing and Alex lashing out at these old generals and their inability to carry out their plans Alex was in on. I have no solid proof of that. It's just an educated guess based on the research I've accumulated so far.
And then we started working with Russia. We first reported it 4.5 years ago. People didn't believe it. Now it's mainstream news. And so General Flynn and others are saying Russia wants to work with us. They're not a threat. Let's destroy the EU. It's unelected. It's evil. Let's free Europe. Let's have a bunch of trade. Let's get China under control. And let's actually have real peace. Now, we'll still have our militaries. We'll still have issues. I'm sure we'll still have problems. But we're not going to try to conquer Russia or vice versa. This is ridiculous. The globalists are attacking all our countries, trying to make us all poor. Let's get them off our back. In September, General Thomas McInerney admitted the United States helped build ISIS as a result of the Obama administration's backing some of the wrong people.
Go back to Iran.
And that's General Michael T. Flynn, another general, basically saying the same thing.
At the same RT conference as Flynn was Charles Balzman. He was on a panel discussion titled InfoWars, Will There Be a Winner?
Next up, we have Charles Balzman. He is from Russia Insider, and come up. Russia Insider, to put it lightly, Charles has basically dedicated his life to fighting misinformation, especially in terms of Russia and the US. And I think that will come up, of course, in the conversation we're about to have.
Balzman founded the news website Russia Insider in 2014, the same year Russia invaded Ukraine's Crimea. At one point, he asked Putin oligarch and associate of Dugin, Alexander Malafy, for money. Balzman's Russia Insider publishes Dugin's articles, as well as InfoWars Fourth Hour host Jay Dyer's articles via Balzman's Russia Faith website. Russia Insider also features Russian Foreign Intelligence-directed Strategic Culture Foundation articles. The U.S. State Department identified SCF as being tasked by SVR in an official report back in August 2020. A short aside on this, 21st Century Mind Wars has conducted independent research on SCF and found that InfoWars employees and hosts such as Alex Jones, Paul Joseph Watson, Greg Reese, and Jay Dyer had relationships with SCF, as well as other Russian intelligence-run disinformation news websites like globalresearch.ca. Alex, Paul, and Jay Dyer would distance themselves from these organizations. However, Greg Reese is still using SCF articles in his reports for InfoWars, and in one specific instance, over 500,000 Americans viewed a report he did on Putin with SCF material. That report focused on Oliver Stone's documentary on Putin, and interestingly, at the RT conference on the same panel as Balzman, was Stone business associate Peter Kuznick.
And then we have Peter Kuznick. He, of course, together with filmmaker Oliver Stone, co-authored the Showtime documentary film series and a book also titled The Untold History of the United States.
People of the West are being told that Putin is so bad that nuclear war is a reasonable option to get rid of him. And if you think this may be true, I urge you first to take the time to watch Oliver Stone's interview with Vladimir Putin and see for yourself if this one man is worth starting a war over. The mainstream talking point is that Vladimir Putin is a killer because he was in the KGB. But what they won't tell you is that he resigned from the KGB because he did not agree with their methods. He described communism as a blind alley, far away from the mainstream of civilization. He is a patriot of old Russia, the 1,000-year melting pot of many cultures, and for his entire leadership has sought peace with NATO. In 2012, the U.S. State Department openly meddled in Russia's elections, and in 2014, they orchestrated a violent overthrow of the Ukrainian government in plain view. Reporting for InfoWars, this is Greg Reese.
Reese is using Russian foreign intelligence disinformation on Americans 2 years after the State Department report came out. 21st Century Mind Wars has contacted him about this and received no reply. We have also contacted the State Department as well and also received no reply. Other government agencies have been notified and no response as well. We feel this is important because the State Department called out news organizations using SCF material like globalresearch.ca, but they failed to call out InfoWars, which suggests InfoWars is indeed protected by a faction of the intelligence community, as discussed in Part 1 of our series. It should be no surprise after hearing this that Russia Insider denies that Russian intelligence unit Fancy Bear and their handle Guccifer 2.0 hacked the DNC and transferred the material to Julian Assange. He was also a speaker at the RT conference, which spawned the Pizzagate psyop through people like Roger Stone, Jack Posobiec, Mike Flynn, and Alex Jones. It should also be no surprise that both Russia Insider and InfoWars feature Zero Hedge articles as well. Zero Hedge itself has been called out by U.S. intelligence officials for using SCF articles. Former AP correspondent and investigative journalist Seth Hatina reported that Zero Hedge is owned by ABC Media Ltd. Out of Bulgaria and managed by Krasimir Ivanjisky, the father of the founder of Zero Hedge, Daniel. Seth states, Krasimir served in the Bulgarian Ministry of Foreign Trade and served in the military before beginning his career as a journalist. The main mission of the Bulgarian press during Ivanjisky's days as a reporter was to disseminate Communist Party propaganda. He is also a member since 1974 in the International Organization of Journalists, a front organization that a declassified CIA study described as an instrumentality of Soviet propaganda. Hatina reached out to a senior former Bulgarian government source, and that source told Mr. Hatina they suspect Zero Hedge is likely tied to Bulgarian and Russian intelligence. Hatina also reached out to an academic with ties to the Bulgarian government who concurred with this assessment as well. Moreover, Rand Corp says Zero Hedge frequently echoes the Kremlin line. Back to Balsman, he speaks fluent Russian, he worked in Russia for 20 years, and it is his father who originally brought him there when his father was employed as the bureau chief for the Associated Press in the Soviet Union. Balsman is also married to a Russian woman, and we can safely assume he has deep ties to Russia. After being inside the Capitol on January 6th, he left his house in the States for the protection of Russia. Balsman is also connected to InfoWars and Alex Jones. He was on InfoWars a few years ago in an interview that seemed forced, like Alex Jones didn't choose him as a guest. Balsman's writers for Russia Insider, such as Eric Stryker and Andrew Anglin, are associated with Dugin's Traditionalist Workers Movement, Stryker having been in a group at Charlottesville with the Traditionalist Workers' Party branded shields. The New York Times said of Balsman that Russian analysts who have followed Mr. Balsman's work say it has the hallmarks of a disinformation project. Olga Lotman, a senior fellow at the Center for European Policy Analysis who researches Russian propaganda campaigns, said his messaging merged seamlessly with that of Mr. Putin's government. Russia Insider appears, she said, to be a classic Russian influence operation.
And Charles Balsman is here with us in studio, Russia-Insider, and he was here with a national Russian film crew today. He wasn't even trying to get on air. I was familiar with his popular site and YouTube channels. He was very well-spoken, and I thought, hey, we never see you in front of the camera. You ought to come out here and explain how you are international business, and you've been all over Russia and all over Europe, and what you think of this whole situation with the attempts of the deep state to claim that Russia runs everything in America and that I'm run by Russia. I think it's probably been 9 years since I've had a Russian film crew here. Again, the media tries to act like if you talk to a Russian, you must be an evil person. How crazy is that? Hillary was selling the Russians uranium and things, but part in Europe. I mean, describe why you have such a background, why you were in Russia.
Okay. I lived in Russia as a child. My dad was a journalist there. He was the bureau chief for the Associated Press. That's the world's largest news agency.
It's all really interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and
so it's funny, you were a business guy, successful, went back to your dad's roots.
Yeah, I guess I had the journalism bug in me somehow. Yeah, so I got to see Russia in the deep communist days.
Now, your dad wasn't
the Brezhnev era.
Wasn't working for the CIA or anything? Because, you know, back then, if somebody was the head of the AP in Russia, they probably were.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't know. I never thought of him as that kind of a person, but I guess nothing's out of the... Alex, I want to also say something about your interpretation of it. So in 2015, that's the first time you came across my radar, because we were very interested in Western media, which were also getting it right about Russia, and very, very few people were. You know, many more people are getting it right today. For example, I could mention Tucker Carlson, I think, basically gets the Russia story right these days, right? So that's a big... that's a big...
Because it's the truth. But I want to be clear. I don't blame the Russians for the Soviets and the communists, because I know the history books, and that's PhD level, but it's a fact that the British Empire and the leftists in the U.S. Funded 100,000 Russian immigrants, people that had come from Russia, to reinvade Russia and overthrow it at a weak point at the end of World War I. And so when you talk about America doing all this, again, it truly is this international criminal cabal that's doing it. And I'm not trying to let America out of some of the bad things it's done in the recent decade to Russia. I'm just simply stating we have to point out that this is literally the same cancer. You know, I don't have any alliance with Russia. I'm not in bed with Russia. But I recognize Russia has the same globalist enemies. No, we should naturally be allied, but that's not what they want. They want to make Russia the #1 enemy. They want... Naturally, do we see, as I had Steve Pachinik on a few days ago, an alliance between the United States and Russia would be common sense in the world today. The resources, the Christian culture, the rise.
The next Jones associate at the event was former chief of the CIA's Soviet Foreign Policy Branch, Ray McGovern. McGovern has been on the InfoWars program a dozen or so times. He is also an associate of Bosman via the World Russia Forum. McGovern helped create Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, or VIPS for short, which is filled with other retired CIA and NSA associates of Jones, like William Binney. McGovern's connections are very interesting, such as Unity 4J, and they will be covered more in another section.
So far away a place with with no real relevance to the U.S.
And Ray, just to interject again, former top CIA analyst Ronald Reagan and George Herbert Walker Bush joins us, a 35, 40-year veteran at the highest levels of global intelligence. Watching it that day with CNN announcing that Russia had just attacked Georgia for no reason, and reading the fine print that they had attacked Russian military bases in South Ossetia and Abkhazia and murdered them en masse, it shows the sheer insanity that our media went with that and said, yeah, let's send in NATO till the Russians threatened nuclear attacks on NATO bases, and then Cheney backed off. As it turned out, from the intel I had, correct me if I'm wrong, that the Georgian president had been basically, like Saddam was encouraged to go into Kuwait, quietly told, yeah, go ahead and do this, we've got your back. What were they thinking there, out of the blue, to just attack Russian military bases? Thank God it didn't escalate more. And then when I said, I'm glad the Russians are showing restraint pulling out of Georgia, they had all the neocons come out and claim, I'm a Russian agent. when literally both sides of my family came over on the Mayflower. I mean, that is how sick this has gotten. I'm a traitor. You're a traitor. You know, they said that about you because we don't want nuclear war, Ray.
In addition to Flynn, Bossman, and McGovern, we also have another speaker at the event with interesting connections. That is Philip Giraldi, who is a former CIA officer and national security editor of the UNS Review. The UNS Review has Andrew Anglin and Eric Stryker as contributors, just like Russia Insider. It also has Dugin and Assange associate Israel Shamir as a contributor too. Shamir wrote for the same newspaper as Dugin called Den, which changed its name to Zavdra after the coup in '91. That August '91 coup was supported by Dugin and Den to prevent the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Giraldi is also a Dugin and Maloof associate via the Quds Force Iranian intelligence recruiting event called New Horizon. Giraldi, McGovern, and Julian Assange, whom our government says was working with Russian military intelligence via Fancy Bear and their Guccifer 2.0 persona, were all on the same panel discussion titled Security or Surveillance.
The game for privacy is gone. It's gone. The mass surveillance is here to stay. The Anglo-American alliance is so pervasive in terms of mass surveillance of domestic and international telecommunications that while some experts can achieve practical privacy for themselves for a limited number of operations, and terrorists are experts, that it's gone for the rest of the population.
Going back to Flynn, during his Q&A session, which was after his discussion with RT host Sophie, he called on Alex's friend's wife, Stacey Herbert. Stacey's husband is Max Kaiser, and both co-hosted a program on RT together, which was canceled after Russia's latest Ukraine invasion. Kaiser is an associate of Putin, and he had relayed a simple message from Putin to Alex before. Kaiser tried at one point to fund Alex with 10,000 bitcoins, but Alex said he lost the computer with the bitcoins. After the 2022 Russia invasion sanctions, Kaiser deleted 1,500 pro-Russia tweets. I mentioned Stacey being called on by Flynn because I don't know if I can accept it as a coincidence. Flynn's public visit was portrayed as somewhat of a debate. Perhaps he really disagreed with the people there, or perhaps that was a show that was manufactured with the help of people like Stacey, who worked for RT.
One more question.
Let me back over here. Way in the back, way in the back.
Every time Sophie asked you about Saudi Arabia, you kept on mentioning Iran and adding that in. How many Shia attacked us on 9/11, or how many Shia attacked us on the 7/7 bus bombings in London? How many Shia were involved in the Paris attacks? There seems a bit of dishonesty about how we treat the whole region, is that we keep on saying, oh, it's the Iranians causing ISIS and causing Libya and causing the disaster in Syria. It seems like, yes, there are obviously in Iraq.
Again, I'm Alex Jones with InfoWars.com. Max Kaiser and his trustworthy sidekick are in the freezing. I guess it's got to be like 9, 10 o'clock at night in Moscow. They're out there in the freezing sleet with just gorgeous images of the Orthodox Russian architecture. They're in Red Square with the Kremlin and the Royal Palace in the background. Max Kaiser, thank you so much. Of course, MaxKaiser.com, investigative journalist, author, Bitcoin baron. Thank you so much for joining us, Max.
Yeah, Alex, can you hear me? Just check on sound. Sounds good?
Yes, sir, and the video is spectacular. Talk about science fiction.
Fantastic video. Here we got Lenin's tomb right here. Right, and over this yellow orangey building here, that is the Kremlin, of course, and that would be where Putin has his office, right in that building, right up there that we're looking at above the wall there of the Kremlin. So on the other side of that wall is the Kremlin.
You've got Stacy there. I believe that is, or I can't see her. Somebody else there.
No, that's Stacy. She's show the Oshunka. This is a Russian hat. Just got this. Beautiful.
So now you're in Moscow. Well, tell us what's happening in Moscow, and then let's get into the world economy. You said it's a mixed bag.
Vladimir Putin says to say hello, by the way.
Did that really happen?
Oh, yeah. He said, when you see Alex, tell him I said hello.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I better not go over there, though.
I'm going to interview Putin this year.
Really?
Yeah, going over there.
Now I am interested in this because I was told by the head of RT America before they even launched it, like 8-9 years ago. Putin's a big listener, and by the way, he likes how you play. We actually got reached out to years ago by some people, and I checked. It was like, yes, Putin wants to come on, but he wants to talk about hunting because you're from Texas, and I was just like,
I noticed you like to go bare-chested now.
Unbelievable. The White House got in touch with RT 2 years ago and said, do not have him back on anymore if you want to keep your license in this country.
Really?
Oh, yeah, that's what I was told. And they never had me back on, which I don't even care about. I mean, I think when I've been on with Max Kaiser, that can still get on.
Concluding part 2 of our series and recapping a bit, the picture is beginning to emerge that the ecosystem associated with InfoWars is clearly working against the Anglo-American geopolitical objectives. The media largely missed the greater story around the RT 10-year anniversary event, hyper-focusing on Flynn and neglecting the others there and their connections. In part 1, we learned a faction of the military and intelligence community was using InfoWars as a spearhead in a war against the Anglo-American establishment. One of the generals mentioned as aiding this agenda was close with individuals working with a prominent KGB general. Flynn was also connected to Vallely. He was in Russia working on getting Putin and Trump together. Vallely also comes from a psychological operations background and famously co-authored the Mine War paper with Lieutenant Colonel Aquino, who was an admitted Satanist and rumored to be in contact with QAnon forum owner Mr. Watkins, as reported by investigative journalist Dave Troy. Vallely was also connected to McInerney, who called for martial law with Vallely. Vallely would also pen an article to Russia Beyond saying Trump wouldn't take a confrontational approach to Russia. Ray McGovern used his voice to defend Julian Assange, who with Russian military intelligence helped release the hacked DNC data. The result of that relationship spawned the Pizzagate psychological operation, which resulted in an armed man going into a pizza shop trying to save non-existent child sex slaves. The Victim Impact Assessment report mentioned InfoWars, yet the PSYOP perpetrators remain free and unpunished. Giraldi also defended Assange, writing for Russia Insider that the GRU didn't hack the DNC. Balsman republishes McGovern, Dugan, Giraldi, Jones, Dyer, and others because they all support Russia's geopolitics. Giraldi with Malouf both attend the New Horizon event in Iran, which our DOJ has warned about being an Iranian intelligence recruiting event. They do this because Dugan states Russia's goal is to include Iran in a Eurasian alliance to get access to warm water ports. Stacy Kaiser also defended Iran at the RT conference in congruence with this goal, and both her and Max Kaiser are connected to InfoWars. There are more relationships to explore here, and those will be covered in a future installment. The important point is, Alex Jones and his associates have made it clear they are fighting the globalists and Russia has the same enemy as they do. Less often do we hear who the globalists are, but Jones said in the 2008 RT interview, they are the Anglo-American establishment, just like Assange says. They won't quite say the United States is the enemy because that would be treason, and they know how to walk a fine line. But in the world of geopolitics, where the game is admittedly zero-sum, as mentioned by Dugan and Brzezinski, you are either supporting the Western powers or the Eastern powers, the former dominated by the United States, and the latter by Russia and China. A loss by one is a gain by another.